Welcome to week 4 of Introduction to Neurodiversity. This is module 4, and in it we're going to be talking about positive niche construction or niche construction. You can pronounce it either way. First, I'd like you to do a little personal reflection. Ask yourself the question, do you feel that you found your own niche in life? Or are you still looking for it? Niche is defined in the dictionary as a comfortable or suitable position in life or employment. The concept of niche construction actually comes to us from evolutionary ecology. And it is defined as helping to ensure the thriving of an organism by their directly modifying their environment in such a way that it enhances the organism's chances for success. Beavers modify their environment by building dams, thereby creating pools which make it more effective for them to catch prey and perhaps even to swim around. Spiders spin webs. Birds build nests. Ants modify their environment by creating anthills. Bees create hives. And in each one of these cases, they're modifying the environment so that whatever it is that they can do based upon their own genetic makeup, they can make it the environment around them more favorable to what it is that they do. Now this, as I said, comes from evolutionary ecology, and I've assigned a couple of sources for this in this week's reading. First of all, I invite you to explore the website nicheconstruction.com. It gives some other examples of niche construction that are a little bit more involved than the ones I just gave you. And then also I assigned a paper called Introduction to Niche Construction. And I want to say that it is a very technical document, and you're not going to necessarily understand everything that they're saying. But I'd like you to kind of weather through it and pick out some of the interesting ideas that it contains. They suggest, for example, that animals can create niches for other animals as well, that niches can be constructed and they can also be destroyed. Niche deterioration, you might call it. And you might want to think about that also as we think about how to intervene with neurodiverse individuals in school and out of school settings. I've taken the idea of niche construction in biology or evolutionary ecology and applied it to education. And I'm using the term positive niche construction because there could be negative niche destruction as well. And positive niche construction I'm defining as helping to ensure the thriving of a child by directly modifying the environment in such a way that it enhances that child's chances for success. And I should point out that in this case, we're doing a lot of the, or maybe most of the niche construction for the child, but there will also be instances where the child will have an active participation in the construction of their own niche, as you'll see. I've developed 9 components for positive niche construction, and we're going to spend the rest of this video looking at each of those 9 components. In case you're confused, you might be looking at my book, Neurodiversity in the Classroom, where I only list 7 components. And that is because about a year or so ago, I added an 8th component called inner resources. And very recently, I came up with a 9th that I thought was important that I've called Educator's attributes. So let's dig in and see what each of these components entails. The first component is the most important of all, and that is strength awareness. It involves knowing and tracking as many strengths, abilities, talents, multiple intelligences for a child or adult or adolescent as we can. and I'll come back to this in different ways throughout the course. And it builds on, of course, the paradigm that we've talked about, the strengths-based paradigm. It's very important for kids to be aware of their strengths. If they don't have that understanding, they won't have the ego strength to plow through the difficulties when they arise. It's important for teachers to have knowledge of a student's strengths, particularly in the inclusive classroom. I've long believed that one of the best ways to ensure the success of an inclusive classroom is to convince the regular class teacher that the kids coming into their classroom who are neurodiverse have strengths that are going to add to the classroom environment, not take away. This is a portrait of the graduating class of the Berkshire Hills Music Academy. It's a school for individuals in late adolescence and early adulthood who have developmental disabilities. Some have something called Williams syndrome, which we'll talk about when we get to the module on intellectual disabilities. Some are on the spectrum, some have Down syndrome, etc. But what's interesting is that these individuals go to the school to learn two primary things. First of all, independent living skills, such as finding their way around the public transportation system, keeping a budget, balancing their checkbook, that kind of thing. But there's a second area that they also spend a lot of time on, and that's a particular strength that they each have in music. They take many classes in instrumentation, in singing, even in composing. And I like to hold this particular group as an exemplar of the idea that what we need to do with kids who are neurodiverse, or adults in this case who are neurodiverse, is two things. First, we need to help them adapt to the environment around them, and that's where the independent living skills come in. But secondly, we need to create an environment around which what they do well can be maximized. And that's what the music training is all about. One of the assignments I've given you, actually your task performance for the week, is to find a neurodiverse individual and fill out the neurodiversity strengths checklist for them, or with them as the case may be. And this is a checklist. It's not a formal diagnostic instrument, and I would certainly not like to see it used that way. But it consists of 165 items, and my intention in developing this checklist was to be as exhaustive as possible. I think it once came to me when I heard a parent share about a child of theirs saying, you know, he just doesn't have any strengths. And I thought, well, you know, they probably are thinking of strengths in a limited sense. And what I need to do is come up with the most comprehensive list of strengths that I can, so that no parent can say that after having filled out this checklist. So at any rate, I hope you enjoy this process of applying the checklist with a particular neurodiverse individual. It's a 5-page inventory, by the way, and I've created a link for you on the Google Classroom platform. The second component of positive niche construction is positive role models. I think it's really important for neurodiverse individuals to see that there are others who have their similar neurodiversity who have done incredible things in life. Certainly we think of Stephen Hawking as one exemplar of that. Temple Grandin is a great positive role model for people on the spectrum because she's an animal scientist who developed machinery for up to 1/3 of the cattle machinery used in the United States. And of course, she's written several books and become almost a media figure. They did a biopic on her life, and she's actually quite well known. Carol Greider would be a good role model, positive role model for people who are diagnosed with dyslexia. Carol Greider is a dyslexic, and she won the Nobel Prize in 2009 for medicine or physiology. She's a geneticist and probably thinks in 3 dimensions. That's something we're going to explore next week when we get to the dyslexic mind. And to be a geneticist, to be a molecular biologist, molecules exist in 3 dimensions. So the ability to think in 3 dimensions may be a crucial skill that her dyslexia actually provides her with. The third component is assistive technologies and universal design for learning tools. The idea for universal design for learning, or universal design, actually comes from architecture and city planning. And this is the idea of creating an environment like the cut in a curb that will allow individuals with wheelchairs or canes to have access without dealing with the curb itself. But the thing with the universal design is that it's not only good for those individuals, it's good for a wide variety of other individuals as well, including kids on skateboards, mothers with strollers, and so forth. Assistive technologies tend to be more specialized. I think a wheelchair might belong in that realm, whereas universal design for learning might include, on the other end of the spectrum, might include peer teaching or hands-on learning, for example, something that's good for everyone. Just a few examples of assistive learning technologies and universal design for learning. One would be this alternative augmentation communication device called Proloquo2Go for individuals with articulation difficulties and also with communication issues. This is a way that they can make their needs known by pressing on a button and having a synthesized speech sound say what it is that they are having difficulty saying themselves. Assistive technologies and UDL tools basically I think of as workarounds. They allow an individual to get toward a goal that they have without being stymied by a particular issue related to their neurodiversity. For individuals with executive functioning difficulties, like those diagnosed with ADHD, this basically planner, school planner for a phone, an app for a phone, can be very useful for many of these kids so that they can keep track of their grades, their schedules, and so forth, their GPA. A resource that I'd really like to recommend to you for this component is the National Center on Universal Design for Learning and the work of David Rose. This is an invaluable website. We're going to come back to this later on in future modules to look at some of the specific UDL tools that they talk about. And they have a very interesting conceptual design of thinking about those tools as well that we'll explore. The fourth component of positive niche construction is strength-based learning strategies. These are strategies that are based on strengths that are developed to help deal with problems or challenges or difficulties. So for example, many kids on the spectrum have what are called special interests. Some people call them obsessions, which is a deficit way of looking at this issue, whereas I think a strength-based issue would say these are legitimate interests that the child has that should be actually magnified. Temple Grandin believes that whole curriculums should be developed around the students' special interests. But in this case, I'm just specifically looking at the strength is special interest. The need in his case may be socialization. So if he can be empowered to be the expert of the classroom in that particular subject and share his enthusiasm and his ideas with the classroom, This is a way of taking, his reluctance to socialize and ramping it up with a strength so that he can be encouraged to engage with others. For students who are diagnosed with dyslexia or have writing problems, dyscalculia perhaps, but they have an art ability. They love to draw, they love cartooning, etc. Having them do cartoons instead of written assignments may be a more effective way of going toward helping them develop their writing skills, because they then can be in their element creating pictures and then also be dealing with the issue of creating meaningful sentences and phrases and so forth. For kids with intellectual disabilities, in particular Down syndrome, I think we've seen in a previous module that John Langdon Down, who gave his name to this syndrome, mentioned that people with Down syndrome often have great imitative abilities, dramatic capabilities. We know that many people with intellectual disabilities have difficulty with abstract concepts, such as in mathematics. That's one of the reasons why their IQ scores tends to be low, because IQ, a lot of what IQ measures is logical, mathematical thinking. But what we could do is take that need to learn math and pair it with their strength in dramatizing and have them do a puppet show, for example, with a word math problem. The next component is enhanced human resource networks. Every child exists in a complex web of relationships, both inside and outside of school. Some of those relationships are life-sustaining, some of them are draining, some of them are bluntly destructive, as in the case of a bully or bullies in the life of a student. So what we need to do is, first of all, conceptualize what that network looks like, and then go to work helping to strengthen positive relationships or create new positive relationships and heal or solve the problems of destructive or draining relationships. So for example, we might want to focus on an anti-bullying program for this particular student. We might want to, let's say they have a controversial relationship with their primary teacher. Enhancing their social network might be getting down to the basics of what's wrong in their relationship, facilitating better communication so that that can be a stronger relationship. It might mean bringing in others to strengthen their social network, such as an older role model in school who can do peer teaching or mentoring for them, or even a grandmother at home who can read to them if they're having difficulty with reading. For people on the spectrum, I like to point to Floor Time, developed by Dr. Stanley Greenspan, as an advantage, a better program than ABA, Applied Behavioral Analysis. ABA works, but it works because kids want to get the rewards, whereas Floor Time is based more on the student's intrinsic ability to play and is child-centered. And the adult, the teacher, or the parent looks for cues from the child that indicate some kind of socialization impulse, and then they relate to it, they interact with it, and they really try to engage the child in back and forth in a play-like environment. And play is so important to the development of all kids that I really endorse this particular strategy for strengthening the child's social network. For kids with academic problems or even behavior problems, actually assigning them a younger child to teach can strengthen their own executive function abilities and make them the responsible party and improve their behavior as a result. For individuals with intellectual disabilities, pairing in that child or adolescent with an older adolescent or adult in a good good sister, good brother program, and where they can get mentoring from that can be really useful adjunct to their social network. The sixth component is affirmative career aspirations. One of the things I've noticed in my career as an educator is that many parents, as well as teachers who have kids that have neurodiversities, often articulate their feelings of dread for when that student will leave school. They think, without the structure of school, with them on their own, how are they going to possibly survive? And there's a kind of doom and gloom idea around here that I don't think is particularly helpful. I think that it speaks of a deficit-based paradigm. And what we need to do is counteract that with some affirmative career aspirations. And the idea is, as we develop strength awareness, we can also help develop the idea that there are careers out there that make use of those strengths. And so the child can be encouraged to develop those strengths so that they can be in that position to go into a job that's going to work for them. Not that's just going to be kind of a ho-hum or even a career that might negatively impact them. So for example, people on the spectrum, particularly at what they refer to as the high functioning level of the autistic spectrum, are finding employment in information technology jobs. This came out of a study, or actually a case study of a company in Denmark that focused on debugging software. They had to go through computer code and look for bugs in the code. And they found that people on the spectrum did a better job of that than typically developing individuals. And so 3/4 of their employees are on the spectrum. And they're not being employed because, it's the right thing to do, or there are legal reasons for doing it, but because they do a better job than anybody else. We'll come back to this when we get to the module on autism. For individuals diagnosed with dyslexia, maybe being in a job that involves a lot of use of words, for example, a secretary or somebody who has to write a lot of reports, would be not a good match for many. Whereas a job like an architect or a graphic designer, where they're engaged with pictures and spatial design, may be more suitable. For kids who are diagnosed with ADHD, the idea of having a job that involves novelty, that involves thrills and chills, that involves change, that involves motion, might be attracted to a career as a firefighter. The next component is positive environmental modifications. For the student who is diagnosed with ADHD, this might include moving out of the classroom and into nature. This is actually a slide from a trip I took to Norway, a visit to a school in Norway. And every elementary school has a set of dwellings or shacks outside the school where kids can learn in nature. And they have this experience every day. And this is tailor-made for the student who is diagnosed with ADHD, because recent research suggests that when they're in nature, their symptoms improve. And the wilder the environment, the more the improvement takes place. I think for the same group of wiggly kids, working out the wiggle furniture can really help, such as stability balls and bouncy bands and other ergonomic furniture. Because we know also from research that when kids with a diagnosis of ADHD can move, can fidget while they work, this actually helps them to concentrate. For kids with social and emotional disorders, having a safe space in the classroom or the school can be an important environmental modification. There's a term called positive timeout that I think is a really good idea. It comes from um, Jane, oh, now I'm forgetting the name, but I'll have to come back with it later on. And she's actually written a book called Positive Timeout. And she suggests that you work with the student and you say, you know, we all get kind of times when we need to take a break. So maybe let's find a space here in the classroom or out in the school area where you can kind of just go whenever you feel out of control, and just as a space that'll make you feel better where you can re-energize. And this is what's being done in schools around the country. Sometimes those rooms are staffed with educators who can teach the child self-regulation skills. And this sort of leads up to the 8th component, which I call inner resources. And these are the ways in which we can empower the students themselves with tools, self-help tools, to make their ecology, their niche, more positive. We can do this by teaching them about their personal strengths. We took the VIA survey. This is the Clifton Youth Strength Explorer. Costs a little bit of money, which is why I didn't use this particular one. But there are a variety of strength-based assessments that we can use. As you know, Bridges has developed its own. We can help kids develop a growth mindset. This is from the work of Carol Dweck, and she has the idea, the distinction between a fixed mindset, which is the idea that you're born with what you have and that's pretty much it, and a growth mindset where you say, okay, this is what I started with, and I know I can keep going, I can keep growing and developing if I work at it. And the research suggests people with a growth mindset do better academically as well as personally when they have that growth mindset. Another way we can empower the neurodiverse child is by helping them understand how their brains work. One book, for example, for young kids is called Your Fantastic Elastic Brain, and it actually teaches the concepts of neuroplasticity to kids. We can also empower kids with self-regulation strategies. I like this poster called The Zones of Regulation, and it puts different emotions in different zones, so that calm is in a green zone, and apprehensive is in a red zone, or terrified is in a red zone. And kids are empowered to develop their own strategies for dealing with being in that particular zone. And they can be empowered to say, you can switch your zones. You can move from a red zone to a green zone by using self-help strategies. I've seen this misused as well, where teachers will do the manipulation from one zone to the next, which is absolutely destroys the good of the strategy entirely. One of the self-regulation strategies we can teach kids is mindfulness practice. I actually did a workshop this morning online for ASCD. They did their national convention this year online, and it was on my new book, Mindfulness in the Classroom. Mindfulness is the idea of teaching kids to be aware of each present moment in time. They can do this by focusing on their breath and then noting when interruptions come to simply notice the interruption and go back to their breath, so that they can start to look at their emotions, their changing emotions and ideas as weather, not anything to get hooked by, which can lead to downward cycles, vicious cycles of tantrums and acting out behavior. The final component of niche construction, positive niche construction, is actually something I came up with just in the past few days. And I think a big impetus for it has been the papers that you have written over the past couple of weeks that I've been enjoying reading. And I don't know, I don't think I ripped anybody off, but I think that as I was keeping notes on your ideas, I started making a little list of qualities or attributes that I think educators need to have to create the positive niche that kids need. You know, we could use all these other components, But if the attitude of the educator is negative, is hostile, is inflexible, rigid, uncaring, that can undo the positive good of these other strategies. So here are the 4 attributes that I came up with, and I certainly invite you to add to this list. You can email me or let me know in your writings what some other good attributes would be. The first one actually came from our module on positive strength-based paradigms and the work of Carl Rogers, his idea of unconditional positive regard. It seems to me that this would be a very important attribute for an educator to have, so that there's this element of total acceptance of the human being. That doesn't mean necessarily condoning negative behaviors, but it just means accepting that person as a person before making judgments about them, and watching and being very careful when those judgments start to creep in. Another attribute I see is kindness and compassion. The ability to empathize with a child or a teen when they have difficulties with something can be a very important, almost therapeutic quality to help them through their difficulties, as well as celebrate with them when they are feeling excitement and joy. And the ability to reflect back those emotions to the child can really help them with their own emotional self-regulation. I think patience is a very important attribute. So many of the kids we work with need more time to do things, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Einstein was a slow learner as a child. Many things that are great took a lot of time to create, and the school structure often doesn't work very well for that with their 42-minute periods. But if we can develop that feeling of patience in ourselves so that we're not transferring our anxieties to the student, this can be really helpful and therapeutic as well. And finally, flexibility seemed to be a good attribute. The ability to use the tools that I've described and others in a flexible way and not to get stuck in kind of a lockstep approach to working with a child. Oh, this is an autistic child. They say with autistic kids, you do this, 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 and this. But rather interacting with the child and being flexible according to his individual needs seems to be a very important component for positive niche construction. So there we have 9 components. Who knows that I'll come up or you'll come up with a 10th component as well or more. But at any rate, that gives you a sense of what I mean by positive niche construction. It's a way of thinking about building environments for kids that will support them in a strength-based way. I'd like to leave you with having a visualization. I'd like you to sort of close your eyes for a moment and visualize a setting. It could be in school, in a classroom, it could be outside of school. A setting which illustrates how you'd like to implement positive niche construction for a particular child, teen, or adult. Just notice yourself using one or more of the components we've covered to help that individual deal with their difficulties or bring out their bright sides. For further information, get my 2 books on neurodiversity. First of all, The Power of Neurodiversity, Unleashing the Advantages of Your Differently Wired Brain, and Neurodiversity in the Classroom, Strength-Based Strategies to Help Students with Special Needs Succeed in School and Life.